Alright, when last we left off, our hero was having all kinds of trouble with Ursula Monkton that ended in his father having a bit of a meltdown and nearly drowning him in the tub. Now, was his father under control of Ursula Monkton, or is that just the man he is? I suppose we're going to find out here in Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Chapter 8. I was shivering convulsively, and I was wet through, and I was cold, very cold. I felt like all my heat had been stolen. The wet clothes clung to my flesh and dripped cold water onto the floor. With every step I took, my sandals made comical squelching noises, and water oozed from little diamond-shaped holes in the top of the sandals. I pulled all of my clothes off, and I left them in a sopping heap on the tiles by the fireplace, where they began to puddle. I took the box of matches from the mantelpiece, turned on the gas tap, and lit the flame in the gas fire. I am staring at a pond, remembering things that are hard to believe. Why do I find the hardest thing for me to believe, looking back, is that a girl of 5 and a boy of 7 had a gas fire in their bedroom? There were no towels in the room, and I stood there, wet, wondering how to dry myself off. I took the thin counterpane that covered my bed, wiped myself off with it, and put on my pajamas. They were red nylon, shiny and striped, with a black, plasticized burn mark on the left sleeve where I had leaned too close to the gas fire once, and the pajama's arm caught alight, although by some miracle I had not burned my arm. There was a dressing gown that I almost never used hanging on the back of the bedroom door, its shadow perfectly positioned to cast nightmare shadows on the wall when the hall light was on and the door was open. I put it on. The bedroom door opened and my sister came in to get the nightdress from under her pillow. She said, "You've been so naughty that I'm not even allowed to be in the room with you. I get to sleep in Mummy and Daddy's bed tonight, and Daddy says I can watch the television." There was an old television in a brown wooden cabinet in the corner of my parents' bedroom that was almost never turned on. The vertical hold was unreliable, and the fuzzy black and white picture had a tendency to stream in a slow ribbon. People's heads vanished off the bottom of the screen as their feet descended in stately fashion from the top. "I don't care," I told her. "Daddy said you ruined his tie and he's all wet," said my sister with satisfaction in her voice. Ursula Monkton was at the bedroom door. "We don't talk to him," she told my sister. "We won't talk to him again until he's allowed to rejoin the family." My sister slipped out, heading to the next room, my parents' room. "You aren't in the family," I told Ursula Monkton. "When Mummy comes back, I'll tell her what Daddy did." "She won't be home for another 2 hours," said Ursula Monkton. "And what can you say to her that will do anything? She backs up your father in everything, doesn't she?" She did. They always presented a perfectly united front. "Don't cross me," said Ursula Monkton. "I have things to do here, and you're getting in my way. Next time, it will be so much worse. Next time, I will lock you in the attic." "I'm not afraid of you," I told her. I was afraid of her, more afraid than I had ever been of anything. "It's hot in here," she told me and smiled. She walked over to the gas fire, reached down, turned it off, took the matches from the mantel. "I said, you're still just a flea." She stopped, smiling. She reached up to the lintel above the door, higher than any child could reach, and she pulled down the key that rested there. She walked out of the room and closed the door. I heard the key turn, heard the lock engage and click. I could hear television voices coming from the room next door. I heard the hallway door close, cutting off the 2 bedrooms from the rest of the house, and I knew that Ursula Monkton was going downstairs. I went over to the lock and squinted through it. I had learned from a book that I could use a pencil to push a key through a keyhole and onto a sheet of paper beneath and free myself that way. But the keyhole was empty. I cried then, cold and still damp in that bedroom, cried with pain and anger and terror, cried safely in the knowledge that no one would come in and see me, that no one would tease me for crying, as they teased any boys at my school who were unwise enough to give way to tears. I heard the gentle patter of raindrops against the glass of my bedroom window, and even that brought me no joy. I cried until I was all cried out. Then I breathed in huge gulps of air, and I thought Ursula Monkton, flapping canvas monster, worm and flea, would get me if I tried to leave the property. I knew that. But Ursula Monkton had locked me in. She would not expect me to leave now, and perhaps, if I was lucky, she might be distracted. I opened the bedroom window and listened to the night. The gentle rain made a noise that was almost a rustling. It was a cold night, and I was already chilled. My sister was in the room next door watching something on the television. She would not hear me. I went over to the door and turned off the light. I walked through the dark bedroom and climbed back on the bed. I'm in my bed, I thought. I'm lying in my bed thinking about how upset I am. Soon I'll fall asleep. I'm in my bed, and I know she's won. And if she checks up on me, I'm in my bed, asleep. I'm in my bed, and it's time for me to sleep now. I can't even keep my eyes open. I'm fast asleep in my bed. I stood on the bed and I climbed out the window. I hung for a moment, then let myself drop as quietly as I could onto the balcony. That was the easy bit. Growing up, I took so many cues from books. They taught me most of what I know about people, about what people did, about how to behave. They were my teachers and my advisors. In books, boys climbed trees, so I climbed trees, sometimes very high, always scared of falling. In books, people climbed up and down drain pipes to get in and out of houses, so I climbed up and down drain pipes too. They were the heavy iron drain pipes of old, clamped to the brick, not today's lightweight plastic affairs. I had never climbed down a drain pipe in the dark or in the rain, but I knew where the footholds were. I knew also the biggest challenge would not be falling, a 20-foot tumble down into the wet flower bed. It was that the drain pipe I was climbing down was past the television room, downstairs, in which I had no doubt Ursula Monkton and my father would be watching television. I tried not to think. I climbed over the brick wall that edged the balcony, reached out until I felt the iron drain pipe cold and slick with rain. I held on to it, then took one large step toward it, letting my bare feet come to rest on the metal clamp that encircled the drain pipe, fixing it sturdily to the brick. I went down a step at a time, imagining myself Batman, imagining myself 100 heroes and heroines of school romances. Then, remembering myself, I imagined that I was a drop of rain on the wall, a brick, a tree. I am on my bed, I thought. I was not here with the light of the TV room uncurtained, spilling out below me, making the rain that fell past the window into a series of glittering lines and streaks. Don't look at me, I thought. Don't look out of the window. I inched down. Usually I would have stepped from the drain pipe over to the TV room's outer window ledge, but that was out of the question. Warily, I lowered myself another few inches, leaned further back into the shadows and away from the light, and I stole a terrifying glance into the room, expecting to see my father and Ursula Monkton staring back at me. The room was empty. The lights were on. The television was on as well, but nobody was sitting on the sofa, and the door to the downstairs hallway was open. I took an easy step down onto the window ledge, hoping against all hope that neither of them would come back in and see me. Then I let myself drop from the ledge into the flower bed. The wet earth was soft against my feet. I was going to run, just run, but there was a light on in the drawing room, where we children never went. The oak-paneled room kept only for the best and special occasions. The curtains were drawn. The curtains were green velvet, lined with white, and the light that escaped them, where they had not been closed all the way, was golden soft. I walked over to the window. The curtains were not completely closed. I could see into the room, see what was immediately in front of me. I was not sure what I was looking at. My father had Ursula Monkton pressed up against the side of the big fireplace in the far wall. He had his back to me. She did too, her hands pressed against the high mantelpiece. He was hugging her from behind. I did not know exactly what they were doing, and I did not really care, not at that moment. All that mattered was that Ursula Monkton had her attention on something that was not me. And I turned away from the gap in the curtains and the light and the house, and I fled, barefoot, into the rainy dark. It was not pitch black. It was the kind of cloudy night where the clouds seemed to gather up light from distant streetlights and houses below, and throw it back at the earth. I could see enough, once my eyes had adjusted. I made it to the bottom of the garden, past the compost heap and the grass cuttings, then down the hill to the lane. Brambles and thorns stuck my feet and pricked my legs, but I kept running. I went over the low metal fence into the lane. I was off our property, and it felt as if a headache I had not known I had suddenly lifted. I whispered urgently, Lettie Hempstock, and I thought, I'm in my bed, I'm dreaming all this, such vivid dreams, I am in my bed. But I did not believe that Ursula Monkton was thinking about me just then. As I ran, I thought of my father, his arms around the housekeeper who wasn't, kissing her neck, and then I saw his face through the chilly bathwater as he held me under, and now I was no longer scared by what had happened in the bathroom. Now I was scared by what it meant that my father was kissing the neck of Ursula Monkton, that his hands were sitting above her waist. My parents were a unit in violet. The future had suddenly become unknowable. Anything could happen. The train of my life had jumped the rails and headed off across the field and was coming down the lane with me then. The flints of the lane hurt my feet as I ran, but I did not care. Soon enough, I was certain the thing that was Ursula Monkton would be done with my father. Perhaps they would go upstairs to check on me together. She would find that I was gone and she would come after me. I thought, if they come after me, they will be in a car. I looked for a gap in the hedgerow on either side of the lane. I spotted a wooden stile and clambered over it, and kept running across the meadow, heart pounding like the biggest, loudest drum there was or had ever been. Barefoot, with my pajamas and my dressing gown all soaked to the knee, and clinging, I ran, not caring about the cowpats. The meadow was easier on my feet than the Flint Lane had been. I was happier, and I felt more real, running on the grass. Thunder rumbled behind me, although I had seen no lightning. I climbed a fence, and my feet sank into the soft earth of a freshly plowed field. I stumbled across it, falling sometimes, but I kept going. Over a stile and into the next field, this one unplowed, and I crossed it, keeping close to the hedge, scared of being too far out in the open. The lights of a car came down the lane, and suddenly and blinding. I froze where I was, closed my eyes, imagined myself asleep in my bed. The car drove past without slowing, and I caught a glimpse of its rear red lights as it moved away from me. A white van that I thought belonged to the Anders family. Still, it made the lane seem less safe, and now I cut across the meadow. I reached the next field. saw it was only divided from the one I was in by a thin length of wire, easy to duck beneath, not even barbed wire. So I reached out my arm and pushed a bare wire up to make room to squeeze under. And it was as if I had been thumped, and thumped hard, in the chest. My arm, where it had grasped the wire of the fence, was convulsed, and my palm was burning as if I had just slammed my funny bone into a wall. I let go of the electric fence and stumbled back. I could not run any longer, but I hurried in the wind and the rain and the darkness along the side of the fence, careful now not to touch it, until I reached a 5-bar gate. I went over the gate and across the field, heading to the deeper darkness at the far end. Trees, I thought, and woodland. And I did not get too close to the edge of the field in case there was another electric fence waiting for me. I hesitated, uncertain where to go next, as if, in answer, the world was illuminated for a moment, but I only needed a moment, by lightning. I saw a wooden stile, and I ran for it. Over the stile I came down into a clump of nettles. I knew, as the hot, cold, pricking, burning covered my exposed ankles and the tops of my feet, but I ran again, ran as best I could. I hoped I was still heading for the Hempstocks farm. I had to be. I crossed one more field before I realized I was no longer where the lane was, or, for that matter, where I was. I knew only that Hempstocks farm was at the end of my lane, but if I was lost in a dark field and the thunderclouds had lowered, and night was so dark, and it was still raining, even if it was not raining hard yet, and now my imagination filled the darkness with wolves and ghosts. I wanted to stop imagining, to stop thinking, but I could not. And behind the wolves and ghosts and the trees that walked, there was Ursula Monckton, telling me that the next time I disobeyed her, it would be so much worse for me, that she would lock me up in the attic. I was not brave. I was running away from everything, and I was cold and wet and lost. I shouted at the top of my voice, "Lettie! Lettie Hempstock! Hello?" But there was no reply, and I had not expected one. The thunder grumbled and rumbled into a low, continuous roar. A lion pushed into irritability, and the lightning was flashing and flickering like a malfunctioning fluorescent tube. In the flickers of light, I could see the area of the field I was in came to a point, with hedges on both sides and no way through. I could see no gate and no stile other than the one I had come on in through, at the far end of the field. Something crackled. I looked up in the sky. I had seen lightning in films and television, long jagged forks of light across the clouds, but the lightning I had seen until now with my own eyes was simply a white flash from above, like the flash of a camera, burning the world in a strobe of visibility. What I saw in the sky then was not that. It was not forked lightning either. It came and it went, a writhing, burning blue whiteness in the sky. It died back and then it flared up, and its flares and flickers illuminated the meadow, made it something I could see. The rain pattered hard, and it whipped against my face, moved in a moment from a drizzle to a downpour. In seconds, my dressing gown was soaked through, but in the light I saw, or thought I saw, an opening in the hedgerow to my right, and I walked, for I could no longer run, not any longer, as fast as I could toward it, hoping it was something real. My wet gown flapping in the gusted wind, and the sound of the flapping cloth horrified me. I did not look up in the sky. I did not look behind me. But I could see the far end of the field, and there was indeed a space between the hedgerows. I almost reached it when a voice said, I thought I told you to stay in your room, and now I find you sneaking around like a drowned sailor." I turned, looked behind me, saw nothing at all. There was nobody there. Then I looked up. The thing that called itself Ursula Monkton hung in the air about 20 feet above me, and lightnings crawled and flickered in the sky behind her. She wasn't flying, she was floating, weightless as a balloon, although the sharp gusts of wind did not move her. Wind howled and whipped at my face. The distant thunder roared, and smaller thunder crackled and spat, and she spoke quietly, but I could hear every word she said as distinctly as if she were whispering it into my ears. "Oh, sweetie, weedy pudding and pie, you are in so much trouble." She was smiling the hugest, toothiest grin I had ever seen on a human face, but she did not look amused. I had been running from her through the darkness for what, half an hour? An hour? I wished I had stayed on the lane and not tried to cut across the field. I would have been at Hemstock's farm by now. Instead, I was lost and I was trapped. Ursula Monkton came lower. Her pink blouse was open and unbuttoned. She wore a white bra. Her midi-skirt flapped in the wind, revealing her calves. She did not appear to be wet despite the storm. Her clothes, her face, her hair were perfectly dry. She was floating above me now, and she reached out her hands. Every move she made, everything she did, was strobed by the tame lightning that flickered and writhed about her. Her fingers opened like flowers in a speeded-up film, and I knew that she was playing with me, and I knew what she wanted me to do, and I hated myself for not standing my ground, but I did what she wanted. I ran. I was a little thing that amused her. She was playing, just as I had seen Monster, the big orange tomcat, play with a mouse, letting it go so that it would run, and then pouncing, and batting it down with a paw. But the mouse still ran, and I had no choice, and I ran too. I ran for the break in the hedge as fast as I could, stumbling and hurting and wet. Her voice was in my ear as I ran. "I told you I was going to lock you in the attic, didn't I? And I will. Your daddy likes me now. He'll do whatever I say. Perhaps from now on, every night he'll come up the ladder and let you out of the attic. He'll make you climb down from the attic, down the ladder, and every night he'll drown you in the bath. He'll plunge you into the cold, cold water. I'll let him do it every night until it bores me, and then I'll tell him not to bring you back, to simply push you under the water until you stop moving, and there's nothing but darkness and water in your lungs. I'll have him leave you in the cold bath, and you'll never move again, and every night I'll kiss him and kiss him." I was through the gap in the hedgerow and running on soft grass. The crackle of lightning and a strange, sharp, metallic smell were so close they made my skin prickle. Everything around me got brighter and brighter, illuminated by the flickering blue-white light. "And when your daddy finally leaves you in the bath for good, you'll be happy," whispered Ursula Monkton, and I imagined that I could feel her lips brushing my ears. "Because you won't like it in the attic. Not just because it's dark up there with the spiders and the ghosts, but because I'm going to bring my friends. You can't see them in the daylight, but they'll be there in the attic with you, and you won't enjoy them at all. They don't like little boys, my friends. They'll pretend to be spiders as big as dogs. Old clothes with nothing inside that tug on you and never let go. The inside of your head. And when you're in the attic, there will be no books and no stories. Not ever again." I had not imagined it. Her lips had brushed my ear. She was floating in the air beside me, so her head was beside mine. And when she caught me looking at her, she smiled her pretend smile, and I could not run any longer. I could barely move. I had a stitch in my side, and I could not catch my breath, and I was done. My legs gave way beneath me, and I stumbled and fell, and this time I did not get up. I felt heat on my legs. I looked down to see a yellow stream coming from the front of my pajama trousers. I was 7 years old, no longer a little child, but I was wetting myself with fear like a baby, and there was nothing I could do about it, while Ursula Monkton, too, hung in the air a few feet above me and watched dispassionately. The hunt was done. She stood up straight in the air, 3 feet above the ground. I was sprawled beneath her on my back in the wet grass. She began to descend, slowly, inexorably, like a person on a broken television screen. Something touched my left hand, something soft. It nosed my hand, and I looked over, fearing a spider as big as a dog, illuminated by the lightnings that writhed about Ursula Monkton. I saw a patch of darkness beside my hand, a patch of darkness with a white spot over one ear. I picked the kitten up in my hand, and I brought it to my heart, and I stroked it. I said, "I won't come with you. You can't make me." I sat up because I felt less vulnerable sitting, and the kitten curled and made itself comfortable in my hand. "Pudding and pie, boy," said Ursula Monkton. Her feet touched the ground. She was illuminated by her own lightnings, like a painting of a woman in grays and greens and blues, and not a real woman at all. "You're just a little boy. I'm a grown-up. I was an adult when your world was a ball of molten rock. I can do whatever I wish to you. Now stand up. I'm taking you home." The kitten, which was burrowing into my chest with its face, made a high-pitched noise, not a mew. I turned, looking away from Ursula Monkton, looking behind me. The girl who was walking toward us across the field wore a shiny red raincoat, with a hood and a pair of black Wellington boots that seemed too big for her. She walked out of the darkness unafraid. She looked up at Ursula Monkton. "Get off my land," said Lettie Hempstock. Ursula Monkton took a step backwards, and she rose at the same time, so she hung in the air above us. Lettie Hempstock reached out to me without glancing down where I sat, and she took my hand, twining her fingers in mine. "I'm not touching your land," said Ursula Monkton. "Go away, little girl." "You are on my land," said Lettie Hempstock. Ursula Monkton smiled, and the lamplight and the lightnings wreathed and writhed about her. She was power incarnate, standing in the crackling air. She was the storm. She was the lightning. She was the adult world with all its power and all its secrets and all its foolish, casual cruelty. She winked at me. I was a 7-year-old boy, and my feet were scratched and bleeding. I had just wet myself, and the thing that floated above me was huge and greedy, and it wanted to take me to the attic, and when it tired of me, it would make my daddy kill me. Lettie Hempstock's hand in mine made me braver. But Lettie was just a girl, even if she was a big girl, even if she was 11, even if she had been 11 for a very long time. Ursula Monkton was an adult. It did not matter at that moment that she was every monster, every witch, every nightmare made flesh. She was an adult. And when adults fight children, adults always win. Lettie said, "You should go back where you came from in the first place. It's not healthy for you to be here. For your own good, go back." A noise in the air, a horrible, twisted, scratching noise. filled with pain and with wrongness. A noise that set my teeth on edge and made the kitten, its front paws resting on my chest, stiffen and its fur prickle. The little thing twisted and clawed up on my shoulder and hissed and it spat. It looked up at Ursula Monkton. It was only when I saw her face that I knew what that noise was. Ursula Monkton was laughing. Go back. When your people ripped the hole in forever, I seized my chance. I could have ruled worlds, but I followed you and I waited and I had patience. I knew that sooner or later the bounds would loosen and I would walk the true earth beneath the sun of heaven. She was not laughing now. Everything here is so weak, little girl. Everything breaks so easily. They want such simple things. I will take all I want from this world, like a child stuffing its fat little face with blackberries from a bush. I did not let go of Lettie's hand, not this time. I stroked the kitten, whose needle claws were digging into my shoulder, and I was bitten for my trouble. But the kitten's bite was not hard, just scared. Her voice came from all around us, and the storm gusted. You kept me away from here for a long time, but then you brought me a door, and I used him to carry me out of my cell. And what can you do now that I am out? Lettie didn't seem angry. She thought about it. Then she said, I could make you a new door. Or better still, I could get Granny to send you across the ocean, all the way to wherever you came from in the beginning. Ursula Monkton spat on the grass, and a tiny ball of flame sputtered and fizzed on the ground where the spit had fallen. Give me the boy, was all she said. He belongs to me. I came here inside of him. I own him. You don't own nothing. You don't, said Lettie Hempstock angrily. Especially not him. Lettie helped me to my feet, and she stood behind me, put her arms around me. We were two children in a field in the night. Lettie held me, and I held the kitten, while above us and all around us a voice said, What will you do? Take him home with you? This world is a world of rules, little girl. He belongs to his parents, after all. Take him away, and his parents will come to bring him home, and his parents belong to me. I'm all bored of you now, said Lettie Hempstock. I gived you a chance. You're on my land. Go away. As she said that, my skin felt like it did when I'd rubbed a balloon on my sweater. Then she touched it to my face and hair. Everything prickled and tickled. My hair was soaked, even wet. It felt like it was starting to stand on end. Lettie Hempstock held me tightly. Don't worry, she whispered. And I was going to say something, to ask why I shouldn't worry, what I had to be afraid of, when the field we were standing in began to glow. It glowed golden. Every blade of grass glowed and glimmered. Every leaf on every tree, even the hedges, were glowing. It was a warm light. It seemed to my eyes as if the soil beneath the grass had transmuted from base matter into pure light. And in the golden glow of the meadow, the blue-white lightning that still crackled around Ursula Monkton seemed much less impressive. Ursula Monkton rose unsteadily, as if the air had just become hot and was carrying her upwards. Then Lettie Hempstock whispered old words into the world, and the meadow exploded into golden light. I saw Ursula Monkton swept up and away, although I felt no wind. But there had to be a wind, for she was flailing and tipping like a dead leaf in a gale. I watched her tumble into the night, and then Ursula Monkton and her lightnings were gone. Come on, said Lettie Hempstock. We should get you in front of a kitchen fire and a hot bath. You'll catch your death. She let go of my hand, stopped hugging me, stepped back. The golden glow dimmed so slowly, and then it was gone, leaving only vanishing glimmers and twinkles in the bushes, like the final moments of fireworks on bonfire night. Is she dead? I asked. No. Then she'll come back and you'll get in trouble. That's as may be, said Lettie. Are you hungry? She asked me, and I knew I was. I had forgotten somehow, but now I remembered. I was hungry, so hungry it hurt. Let's see. Lettie was talking as she led me through the field. You're wet through. We'll need to get you something to wear. I'll have to look in the chest of drawers in the green bedroom. I think Cousin Japheth left some of his clothes when he went off to fight in the mouse wars. He wasn't much bigger than you. The kitten was licking my finger with a small, rough tongue. I found a kitten, I said. I can see that. She must have followed you back from the fields while you pulled her up. This is that kitten? The same one that I picked? Yep. Did she tell you her name yet? No? Do they do that? Sometimes, if you listen. I saw the lights of the Hemstocks farm in front of us, welcoming, and I was cheered, although I could not understand how we had got from the field where we were to the farmhouse so quickly. You were lucky, said Lettie. 15 feet further back in the field belongs to Colin Anders. You would have come anyway, I told her. You would have saved me. She squeezed my arm with her hand, but she said nothing. I said, Lettie, I don't want to go home. That was not true. I wanted to go home more than anything, just not to the place I had fled that night. I wanted to go back to the home I had lived in before the opal miner had killed himself in our little white Minnie, or before he had run over my kitten. The ball of dark fur pressed itself into my chest. I wished she was my kitten, and knew that she was not. The rain had become a drizzle. We splashed through deep puddles. Lettie in her Wellington boots, my stinging bare feet. The smell of manure was sharp in the air as we reached the farmyard, and then walked through a side door and into the huge farmhouse kitchen. I didn't think we would beat the intensity of the bathtub scene, but there you have it. All right, I will be back soon with chapter 9.